Somewhere in Washington, a piece of paper decided the fate of billions of dollars. Not a computer model, not a boardroom vote. A handwritten note sitting on a desk photographed by accident at 11:33 in the morning. One line was readable: buy Japanese yen, $5 to $10 billion. That's how a multi-billion-dollar operation got approved, with a pen. That Friday, July 31st, for the first time since 1998, the United States stepped into the currency market to defend Japan's money. Not America's own currency, Japan's. The same Japan that owns more U.S. government debt than any other country on the planet. So why would the world's biggest debtor rush to save its biggest lender? And why did it break a rule that held steady for 28 years? Imagine having a credit card with no spending limit, and no one ever checks the statement. That's basically what the U.S. Treasury Secretary has access to. It's called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. It was built almost 100 years ago with one job: keep the dollar steady. But over the decades, that turned into spend it on whatever you want. One Treasury Secretary reportedly used it to buy an $8,000 rug. Another took a $131,000 trip with 42 people. No one could explain why. By law, once the Secretary decides, that's final. No committee reviews it. No one can challenge it. So when the Japanese yen crashed to a 40-year low, the Treasury didn't wait for a hearing. It reached into that fund and pulled out $13 billion worth of euros, not dollars, to go buy yen. Here's the part that stings. The European Central Bank found out only after the trade was already done. That's the equivalent of selling your neighbor's car without telling them, just to pay off your cousin's credit card debt. Just 8 days earlier, the U.S. Treasury published its own watch list, the report that tracks countries suspected of manipulating their currency. Japan was on that list. 8 days later, the same department that flagged Japan turned around and defended its currency for it. Naturally, people had questions, including the president himself.
Mr. President, why is the U.S. intervening to support the Japan yen at this time?
To support who?
To support the Japanese currency.
Because we have a good relationship with Japan. We're very strong, very, very strong financially. And they have a weakening yen, and they wanted a little bit of help, and we're always there for Japan. Japan's been very good to us, with the exception, of course, of Pearl Harbor.
Somewhere in Washington, a piece of paper decided the fate of billions of dollars. Not a computer model, not a boardroom vote. A handwritten note sitting on a desk, photographed by accident. One line was readable: buy Japanese yen, $5 to $10 billion. That's it. That Friday, July 31st, for the first time since 1998, the United States stepped in to defend Japan's money. Not America's own currency, Japan's. The same Japan that owns more U.S. government debt than any other country. So why would the world's biggest debtor rush to save its biggest lender? And why break a 28-year rule? Imagine having a credit card with no spending limit, and no one ever checks the statement. That's the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Built 100 years ago with one job: keep the dollar steady. But over the decades, keep it steady turned into spend it on whatever you want. By law, once the Secretary decides, that's final. No committee reviews it. No one can challenge it. When the yen crashed to a 40-year low, the Treasury pulled out $13 billion worth of euros to buy yen. The European Central Bank found out only after the trade was done, like selling your neighbor's car without asking. Just 8 days earlier, the U.S. flagged Japan on its watch list for currency manipulation. 8 days later, the same department turned around and defended the very same currency. To understand why Washington panicked, look at the hole Japan dug. More debt than any major country on Earth. 1 out of every 9 yen the government spends goes just to paying interest. Japan's rate sits around 1%. America's is over 3.5%. That difference is the entire reason the yen is collapsing. Money doesn't care about loyalty. It just leaves for wherever it earns more every single time. If Japan raises rates, it must pay massive interest on the trillions in debt its own central bank holds. It's a wall they can't climb over. So they sell U.S. bonds, $70 billion in a single month. Here's the domino effect. Japan sells bonds, which pushes American interest rates higher. Higher U.S. rates make the dollar more attractive, making the yen even weaker, the very problem they were fixing. Washington had to step in, before Japan's next move made the wheels spin even faster. The U.S. couldn't let its biggest lender keep flooding the market with American debt every time it needed cash. So there's a quieter option, one most people have never heard of. Picture this. Instead of selling your watch outright, you hand it to a counter, walk out with cash, and come back later to buy it back for a small fee. The watch never actually left your ownership. It just changed hands temporarily. That's essentially what the FIMA Repo Facility does for governments. A foreign central bank hands the Fed its U.S. bonds, gets cash back, uses that cash to defend its currency, and buys the bonds back later. That small difference is the Fed's fee for the favor. No dumping, no panic in the bond market, no visible damage. It's a way to raise cash without ever technically becoming a seller. Here's the strange part. 48 hours after the currency operation, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent publicly said this facility was an important backstop. He wanted the Fed to expand it. At the time, the balance sitting inside it was close to zero. Almost nobody had touched it in months. Someone actually asked him about this directly on live television. His answer pointed to the size of the bond market growing since 2020. True. But it wasn't really an answer to the question he was asked. What he didn't mention, the facility has a $60 billion per country ceiling, and Japan had just spent $73 billion defending its currency in a single month. You don't publicly ask a central bank to expand an empty tool unless you already know a bigger version of this problem is coming. A former Treasury official suggested that Washington may have been genuinely worried a collapsing yen would push American borrowing costs even higher. 3 different explanations from 3 different people. The president said friendship, the Treasury Secretary said stability, and the man who spent 40 years inside the building said there's more going on underneath. Different countries, different decades, same underlying mechanism. Whenever a nation buries itself in debt it can't realistically pay down, it eventually hits a wall where textbook rules of economics stop applying. Japan couldn't defend its currency and pay its debt at the same time. America couldn't afford to let its biggest lender collapse. So both countries leaned on tools most people will never hear about. Emergency currency purchases and quiet cash for bonds arrangements behind closed doors. None of it solved the actual problem. The debt is still there. They didn't put out the fire. They just bought themselves more time. Here's the part that actually matters to you. Every one of these emergency moves has the same job. Buy time without anyone noticing. But time isn't free. Someone always pays for it. And historically, the bill lands on regular prices. The cost of a mortgage. The cost of everything you buy. It shows up slowly, months later, in a receipt that never explains why. The strangest part is that none of it was ever actually hidden. A public data release, a press gaggle, a tweet, a photograph taken by accident. Everything was sitting out in the open the whole time. You just had to know where to look. The system just got better at hiding who pays. So now that you've seen how it actually works, are you still going to assume this has nothing to do with you? If patterns like this interest you, that's what this channel is built around. The fine print and quiet decisions most people never get shown. Subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one, and let me know in the comments. Do you think this is the last time? See you in the next one.